Somewhere, a farmer plants rice every 4 seconds. 4 seconds. The crop that feeds more than half of humanity today traces parts of its lineage through islands that most historical textbooks skip entirely. And one of those origin points sits in an archipelago whose contribution was quietly absorbed into someone else's agricultural story. This is about rice and memory. And who gets credited for the work they did? The Tang dynasty of China ran from roughly the early 7th century through the early 10th century. Let's say historians remember it as a golden age of poetry, silk, and imperial ambition. Fewer historians mention that Tang administrators faced a recurring challenge. Drought-resistant, fast-maturing grain that could feed their growing population was not something they had domesticated themselves. They needed it. And they found it moving through trade networks that connected the South China Sea to a cluster of islands the Chinese called, at various points, May I, or related transliterations of what local people called their own home. Well, those islands were the Philippine archipelago. Think about it. The specific rice variety at the center of this story is the one scholars now classify under the broader Champa rice family. Tang and later Song dynasty records describe receiving seeds and cultivation knowledge through maritime trade with southern neighbors. The Song records are more explicit. They describe a fast-ripening variety that allowed farmers to harvest twice or 3 times annually, something Chinese lowland cultivation had not reliably achieved. Emperor Zhenzong of the Song dynasty ordered wide distribution of this variety around 1012 CE. Chinese historical memory credits that moment as the birth of a revolution in Chinese agriculture. Pause there for a moment. 1100 years of agricultural history, and the credit lands on the emperor who distributed the seed, not on the farmers who bred it across generations. Incidentally, the Philippine connection runs through what archaeobotanists and historians of Southeast Asian agriculture have pieced together over the past several decades. The work of scholars studying rice domestication in island Southeast Asia suggests the archipelago was not a passive transit point for agricultural goods. Filipino ancestors were active selectors and breeders. They worked with Oryza sativa across conditions that the mainland did not share. Typhoon cycles, varied elevation, salt-adjacent coastal soil, and microclimates that forced rapid adaptation. Stop for a second. Incidentally, the Cordillera rice terraces of northern Luzon are often called the 8th wonder of the world. That phrase gets repeated so often it has lost meaning. Strip away the tourism brochure language and consider the engineering reality. Those terraces require continuous, intergenerational management of water, soil, and seed stock across altitudes ranging from several hundred to over 1,500 meters. The Ifugao people who built and maintained them have done so for somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 years, depending on which dating methodology a researcher accepts. The seed varieties they cultivated through that entire period were not imports they received from China. Chinese records show the movement going the other direction. But there's a detail. The Ma'ai trading relationship with the Tang and pre-Tang southern Chinese polities was well documented by Chinese sources themselves. The Laguna copperplate inscription, the oldest known written document found in the Philippines, dates to 900 CE and references a debt settlement involving a community leader and trading relationships with regional powers. The archipelago had organized polities, trade networks, and surplus agricultural production before European contact. The rice those polities exported northward was not wild. It was bred. Here is where agricultural history becomes uncomfortable in a broader sense. In a specific, technical way, when Chinese administrators adopted fast-ripening rice varieties, they gave them Chinese names, cataloged them in Chinese administrative records, and distributed them through Chinese bureaucratic systems. The origin labeling shifted. Within a few generations of documentation, the paper trail began reading as though the varieties had appeared or had been innovated within a Chinese context. The people who spent centuries developing drought resistance and dual harvest cycles through selection pressure and careful seed saving did not leave bureaucratic paper trails in Chinese. They left the rice itself. This pattern repeated across the colonial world. Spanish friars who documented Philippine agriculture in the 16th and 17th centuries noted the extraordinary diversity of rice varieties cultivated across different islands. A single Visayan village might maintain separate strains for wet and dry conditions, for different soil types, and for different elevations. One friar's account described a coastal community distinguishing between more than 20 named rice varieties and knowing the specific preparation and growing conditions each required. 20 named varieties in one community. That is not the agricultural vocabulary of a people who recently adopted a crop. The International Rice Research Institute, founded in Los Baños in the 1960s, sits on Philippine soil for reasons that are not accidental. The archipelago's rice biodiversity made it a logical home for global rice science. Researchers at IRI drew on traditional Philippine varieties in developing IR8, the high-yield strain released in 1966 that significantly shifted food production across Asia. Filipino farmers had been maintaining the genetic material those researchers needed. They had been maintaining it for centuries. IR8 had a nickname. People called it the miracle rice. Look, the miracle was the accumulated selection work of anonymous farmers across generations of Philippine agricultural history. The institution that formalized and extended that work sits in Laguna Province. The variety that changed global food security drew from a gene pool that Philippine farming communities had curated across a time frame no single government program could replicate. Now pay attention. The Tang dynasty's grain problem got solved. The Song dynasty's agricultural revolution happened. IR8 fed hundreds of millions. Each of those stories has a credited author. Behind every credited author in this particular lineage, there is a farmer on a Philippine hillside or coastal flat who looked at two rice plants, noticed which one handled the dry season better, and saved those seeds, year after year, generation after generation, with no institution recording the name and with no court historian noting the contribution. Agricultural knowledge does not require a palace to be sophisticated. It requires patience, observation, and the discipline to keep doing the same careful work across lifetimes when the results will not appear for decades. Wait a second. The Ifugao maintained their terrace irrigation systems continuously across 2 millennia. The seed stock they kept was not hobby farming. It was precision biological engineering conducted without the vocabulary of biology, through the older and more reliable technology of paying close attention. Philippine farming communities bred rice varieties that fed empires. The empires named the varieties after themselves. The farming communities planted the next season's crop and kept working. There's a catch. The most durable things humans have ever built are not the things that survived on paper. They are the things that survived in the hands of people who kept showing up.